Racist cops stopped a black woman for driving while black, but when they saw her badge. Captain Samantha Sam Carter stood before the mirror in her new apartment, adjusting her crisp white shirt and straightening her badge. At 38, she was about to embark on the most significant challenge of her career, becoming the first black woman to serve as chief of police in the city of Millbrook. Sam's dark brown eyes, usually warm and inviting, now held a steely determination. Her natural hair, worn in a short professional style, framed a face that had seen its share of challenges and triumphs. Years of working her way up through the ranks had left her with an air of quiet confidence, tempered by a deep understanding of the complexities of law enforcement. Growing up in a tough neighborhood in South Chicago, Sam had seen firsthand the strained relationships between the police and the community. Her father, a respected community leader, had always emphasized the importance of bridge building and understanding. It was his influence, combined with a desire to make real change, that had led Sam to pursue a career in law enforcement. Over the years, Sam had distinguished herself as an officer who could navigate the delicate balance between upholding the law and serving the community. Her approach, which emphasized communication and de-escalation, had earned her both accolades from community leaders and skepticism from some of her more traditional colleagues. Now, as she prepared to take on the role of chief, Sam was acutely aware of the challenges that lay ahead. Millbrook, a mid-sized city with a diverse population, had been grappling with issues of police misconduct and racial tension. The previous chief had resigned amid controversy, and the mayor had taken a risk in appointing Sam, an outsider with a reputation for reform. As she grabbed her keys and headed out the door, Sam thought about the memo she had sent out the previous day, introducing herself to the department. She had deliberately chosen not to include a photo, wanting her ideas and qualifications to speak for themselves before anyone could make judgments based on her race or gender. Driving through the early morning streets of Millbrook, Sam took in the city that was now her responsibility. She saw the potential for positive change, but also the deep-seated issues that would need to be addressed. It wouldn't be easy, but Sam was ready for the challenge. Little did she know that her first day as chief would begin with an encounter that would test her resolve, challenge her officers, and set the tone for her entire tenure in Millbrook. As she turned onto Main Street, heading towards the police station, Sam was about to face a situation that would bring the issues of racial profiling and police culture to the forefront in a way she never expected. The morning sun was just beginning to warm the streets of Millbrook as Sam Carter drove her modest sedan towards the police station. She had deliberately chosen to arrive early on her first day, hoping to get a feel for the city and its rhythms before diving into her new role. As she approached a four-way stop, Sam noticed a police cruiser idling at the intersection. Two officers sat inside, their attention focused on something in the vehicle. Sam thought nothing of it as she came to a stop, signaled, and began to make her turn. Suddenly, the cruiser's lights flashed to life, and the sharp wail of a siren cut through the morning quiet. Surprised, Sam checked her rearview mirror, assuming the officers must be responding to a call. But as she pulled over to let them pass, she realized with a sinking feeling that they were pulling her over. Taking a deep breath, Sam ran through a mental checklist. Her license and registration were up to date, she hadn't been speeding, and her car was in perfect working order. As the two officers approached her vehicle, one on each side, she kept her hands visible on the steering wheel, all too aware of how quickly these situations could escalate. "License and registration, please," the officer on the driver's side said, his tone brusque and impersonal. Sam noticed his nameplate read, "Officer Daniels." "Certainly, officer," Sam replied calmly, slowly reaching for her documents. "May I ask why I'm being pulled over?" Officer Daniels' partner, a younger man whose nameplate identified him as Officer Rodriguez, spoke up from the passenger side. "You failed to come to a complete stop at the intersection back there." Sam frowned, certain that she had stopped fully. "I'm sorry, but I'm quite sure I did come to a complete stop. Is it possible you might have missed it?" Officer Daniels' expression hardened. "Ma'am, are you saying we're lying? We observed the violation." Now I'm going to need to see your license and registration. Sam handed over the documents, her mind racing. She knew she was in a delicate situation. As a black woman being pulled over by two white officers, she was acutely aware of the potential for things to go wrong. At the same time, as the incoming chief of police, she was getting a first-hand look at how her officers interacted with the public. And she wasn't impressed. As Officer Daniels scrutinized her license, his eyebrows furrowed. "This address isn't local. What brings you to Millbrook?" "I recently moved here for work," Sam replied, choosing her words carefully. She had not yet decided how to handle this situation, whether to reveal her identity or to experience this stop as any other citizen would. Officer Rodriguez leaned in, his voice taking on a more aggressive tone. "And what kind of work would that be? We don't get many new folks around here, especially not." He trailed off, but the implication was clear. Sam felt a flash of anger but kept her voice level. "I work in law enforcement, actually." Both officers exchanged skeptical glances. "Law enforcement?" Officer Daniels repeated, his tone making it clear he didn't believe her. "I'm going to need you to step out of the vehicle, ma'am." Sam's heart raced, but she complied, knowing that the situation was balanced on a knife's edge. As she stood beside her car, she could feel the officers' eyes on her, their hands hovering near their weapons. "I'm going to perform a quick pat-down," Officer Daniels announced, "for our safety." "Officer," Sam said firmly, "I do not consent to a search. I have identified myself and provided my documentation. Unless you have probable cause to believe I've committed a crime, I am not legally obligated to submit to a pat-down." The tension in the air thickened. Officer Rodriguez stepped closer, his hand now resting on his holster. "Listen, lady, we don't know who you are or what you're doing here. Cooperate, or we're going to have a problem." Sam stood her ground, her years of training and experience warring with the very real fear that came with being a black person in this situation. She knew that her next words and actions would be crucial, not just for her safety in this moment, but for the future of the department she was about to lead. Taking a deep breath, Sam made a decision. "Officers," she said, her voice calm but carrying an unmistakable note of authority, "my name is Samantha Carter. As of this morning, I am the new chief of police for Millbrook, and I believe we need to have a serious conversation about what's happening here." The shock on the officers' faces was immediate and profound. Officer Daniels' hand, which had been reaching for his handcuffs, froze in midair. Officer Rodriguez took a step back, his eyes wide with disbelief. In that moment of stunned silence, with the early morning traffic beginning to pick up around them, Sam knew that her first day as chief had taken an unexpected turn. The encounter that was unfolding would set the stage for the challenges and changes that lay ahead, not just for her, but for the entire Millbrook Police Department. The revelation of Sam's identity hit Officers Daniels and Rodriguez like a thunderbolt. For a moment, the three of them stood frozen on the side of the road, the morning traffic flowing past, oblivious to the drama unfolding. Officer Daniels was the first to recover. Chief Carter, I apologize. We had no idea." Sam held up a hand, cutting him off. "Let's not do this here on the street. I want both of you to follow me to the station. We'll continue this conversation in my office." The drive to the station was tense, with Sam acutely aware of the cruiser following close behind her. As she pulled into the parking lot, she saw curious looks from officers arriving for the morning shift. Clearly, word of her appointment hadn't fully circulated yet. In her new office, with Officers Daniels and Rodriguez standing at attention before her desk, Sam took a moment to gather her thoughts. The reality of what had just transpired was sinking in, and with it the understanding that this incident was a microcosm of the issues plaguing the department. "Officers," she began, her voice firm but not unkind, "I want you to walk me through exactly what happened out there. What prompted you to pull me over?" Officer Daniels cleared his throat nervously. "Chief, we observed your vehicle fail to come to a complete stop at the intersection." Sam leaned forward, her gaze intense. "Are you certain about that, Officer Daniels?" "Because I am absolutely sure that I did stop completely. Is it possible that your perception might have been influenced by something else?" The implication hung heavy in the air. Officer Rodriguez shifted uncomfortably. "Chief, we wouldn't. We don't." You don't what, Officer Rodriguez? Sam pressed. You don't profile? You don't make assumptions based on race? Because from where I'm standing, that's exactly what happened today. The officers exchanged glances, the reality of their situation dawning on them. They had racially profiled their new chief of police on her first day on the job. Sam stood up, walking around her desk to face them directly. I want you both to understand something. What happened today isn't just about me. It's about every person of color in this city who has ever been stopped for driving while black. It's about the breach of trust between the police and the community we're meant to serve. She paused, letting her words sink in. But it's also an opportunity for us to confront these issues head-on and make real changes in this department. As Sam spoke, she could see the mix of emotions playing across the officers' faces: shame, defensiveness, and she hoped the beginnings of understanding. I'm not going to fire you, she continued, noting their visible relief. But this incident will be documented, and you will both be required to undergo additional training on bias and community relations. Officer Daniels nodded solemnly. Yes, Chief, we understand. Sam wasn't finished. More importantly, I want you both to think hard about what happened today, about the assumptions you made and the actions you took. Because this isn't just about following procedures or avoiding complaints. It's about being better officers, better public servants, and better human beings. As the officers left her office, visibly shaken by the encounter, Sam sank into her chair. She had known her job would be challenging, but she hadn't expected to be confronting the department's issues so directly, so immediately. Looking out her window at the officers going about their duties in the parking lot, Sam realized that her experience this morning was both a stark reminder of the problems she faced and a powerful tool for driving change. She had seen firsthand the biases at work in her department, but she had also seen an opportunity for growth and improvement. With a deep breath, Sam turned to her computer. It was time to draft a department-wide memo. Her first day had barely begun, but it was already clear that the path to reform would be more urgent and more personal than she had ever anticipated. As the day progressed, Sam found herself grappling with how to address the morning's incident. She knew that her response would set the tone for her entire tenure as chief. After hours of careful consideration, she made a decision that would send ripples through the entire department. Sam called a mandatory all-hands meeting for the following morning. She spent the evening drafting her speech, weighing each word carefully. She knew she was taking a risk by being so open about what had happened, but she believed that transparency was the only way forward. The next morning, as she stood before the assembled officers in the precinct's largest conference room, Sam could feel the mix of curiosity and apprehension in the air. Many of the officers were seeing her for the first time, and she could read the surprise on their faces as they realized their new chief was a black woman. Good morning, everyone, Sam began, her voice steady and authoritative. I'm Chief Samantha Carter. Some of you may have heard rumors about an incident that occurred yesterday morning involving 2 of our officers. I'm here to address those rumors directly and to talk about where we go from here. She recounted the events of the traffic stop in detail, not sparing herself or the officers involved. As she spoke, she could see the shock and discomfort on many faces. Some officers shifted uneasily, while others looked angry or defensive. I'm sharing this with you not to embarrass anyone, Sam continued, but because I believe we have a unique opportunity here. What happened to me yesterday morning is something that happens to people of color in our community every day. The only difference is I have the power to do something about it. She outlined her plan: a comprehensive review of the department's policies and procedures, mandatory bias training for all officers, and the establishment of a community oversight board. She also announced that she would be implementing a ride-along program where she would personally accompany officers on their patrols to get a first-hand look at their interactions with the public. I know some of you may be feeling defensive right now, Sam acknowledged. You might be thinking that you're not racist, that you're one of the good ones. But I'm not here to point fingers or assign blame. I'm here to make us better, all of us. Because the truth is, we all have biases. The key is recognizing them and learning how to ensure they don't affect our actions." As she concluded her speech, the room was silent. Sam could see a range of emotions on the faces before her: shock, anger, thoughtfulness, and even a few nods of agreement. The consequences of Sam's decision were immediate and far-reaching. As the officers filed out of the conference room, she could hear the buzz of conversation. Some were supportive, praising her courage and honesty. Others were clearly upset, feeling that she had thrown the department under the bus on her first day. Over the next few weeks, Sam faced both positive and negative reactions to her bold move. Many community leaders and civil rights organizations praised her transparency and commitment to reform. Local news outlets ran stories about the chief who was racially profiled, bringing national attention to Millbrook and its police department. However, Sam also faced significant pushback from within the department. A group of older officers, led by Sergeant Frank Miller, a 30-year veteran of the force, were particularly vocal in their opposition. They argued that Sam was undermining police authority and morale, making it harder for officers to do their jobs effectively. The police union also expressed concerns, worried that Sam's new policies might leave officers vulnerable to unfair accusations of bias. They pushed back against the Community Oversight Board, arguing that it would interfere with police operations. Despite the challenges, Sam remained committed to her course of action. She met with officers individually and in small groups, listening to their concerns and explaining her vision for the department. She reached out to community leaders, working to build bridges and restore trust. One particularly difficult moment came when Officer Daniels, one of the officers involved in her traffic stop, requested a transfer to another precinct. Sam granted his request, but not before having a long conversation with him about growth, accountability, and the opportunity to be part of positive change. As the weeks turned into months, Sam began to see small signs of progress. Reports of racial profiling decreased, and community complaints about officer behavior dropped. The Ride-Along program, while initially met with skepticism, began to foster better understanding between officers and the communities they served. But Sam knew the road ahead would be long and difficult. Every policy change was met with resistance, every new initiative scrutinized. She faced a constant balancing act between pushing for necessary reforms and maintaining the trust and cooperation of her officers. Late one night, as Sam sat in her office reviewing the latest batch of community feedback forms, she reflected on the consequences of her decision. She had known that being transparent about her own experience would be risky, but she hadn't fully anticipated the scale of the response. The spotlight on Millbrook was intense, and the pressure to succeed was enormous. But as she looked at a thank you note from a community member who had a positive interaction with an officer during a traffic stop, Sam felt a renewed sense of purpose. The path she had chosen was difficult, but she believed it was the right one. With determination, she turned back to her work, ready to face whatever challenges the next day might bring. As Sam worked to implement her reforms within the Millbrook Police Department, a secondary plot began to unfold in the City Council. Councilman Richard Hawthorne, a longtime advocate for tough-on-crime policies, saw Sam's progressive approach as a threat to public safety and his own political agenda. Hawthorne began a subtle campaign to undermine Sam's authority and discredit her reforms. He used his influence to plant skeptical stories in the local media, questioning whether Sam's focus on community relations was coming at the expense of effective policing. He also reached out to disgruntled officers, encouraging them to speak out against the changes. One evening, as Sam was leaving the precinct, she was approached by Officer Sarah Chen, a young patrol officer who had been supportive of the reforms. Chen looked nervous as she glanced around to ensure they were alone. "Chief," Chen said in a low voice, "I thought you should know. Councilman Hawthorne has been meeting with some of the officers off the record. He's promising to push for budget increases and better equipment if they help him restore order to the department." Sam thanked Chen for the information, her mind already racing with the implications. She had expected some political pushback, but Hawthorne's behind-the-scenes maneuvering was a more serious threat. Over the next few weeks, Sam noticed a shift in the department's dynamics. Some officers who had been cautiously supportive of her initiatives became more reserved. There was an increase in complaints about the new training programs, with officers arguing they took time away from real police work. The situation came to a head when the city council announced a special session to review the police department's budget. Hawthorne had rallied enough support to propose a measure that would tie funding to performance metrics, essentially a return to the quota-based policing that Sam had been working to move away from. Sam knew she needed to act fast. She reached out to community leaders and civil rights organizations, asking them to speak at the council meeting about the positive impact of the new policies. She also prepared a comprehensive report showing how community-oriented policing had actually led to a decrease in violent crime, even if the overall number of arrests had gone down. The night before the council meeting, Sam received an unexpected visitor. Sergeant Frank Miller, who had been one of her most vocal critics, asked to speak with her privately. "Chief," Miller began, looking uncomfortable, "I wanted you to know, I'm not on board with what Hawthorne is doing. I may not agree with all your changes, but I've been on the force long enough to know when a politician is using us for his own gain." Sam was surprised but grateful for Miller's support. "Thank you, Sergeant. I appreciate your honesty. Do you think other officers feel the same way?" Miller nodded slowly. "More than you might think. A lot of us may be old school, but we're not blind. We've seen how the community's starting to trust us more. It makes our job easier in the long run." As Miller left, Sam felt a glimmer of hope. She had been so focused on the external threats to her reforms that she had underestimated the potential for change within her own ranks. The next day, as Sam prepared to face the city council, she knew that the outcome of this meeting would be crucial, not just for her career, but for the future of policing in Millbrook. The secondary plot of political maneuvering had become intertwined with her primary mission of reforming the department, creating a complex challenge that would test her leadership skills to their limits. With a deep breath, Sam gathered her notes and headed to City Hall, ready to fight for the changes she believed in and the department she was determined to lead into a new era. In the months following the city council showdown, Sam found herself navigating a complex web of relationships within the department and the broader community. Her victory at the council meeting, where she successfully defended her reforms and secured continued funding, had earned her respect from some quarters, but also intensified the opposition from others. One of the most significant developments was her evolving relationship with Sergeant Frank Miller. The veteran officer, once her staunchest critic, had become an unexpected ally. Their conversations, once tense and confrontational, gradually became more open and productive. One afternoon, as they walked back to the precinct after a community meeting, Miller turned to Sam with a thoughtful expression. "You know, Chief, I've been thinking about what you said about community policing. I'll admit I was skeptical at first, but I'm starting to see the benefits." Sam nodded encouragingly. "I'm glad to hear that, Frank. What changed your mind?" Miller chuckled ruefully. "Well, last week I was patrolling in the Oak Park neighborhood, you know, the one we used to call a high-crime area. But instead of just driving through, I stopped and talked to some of the residents, like you've been pushing us to do. And you know what? I learned more about what's really going on there in one afternoon than I had in years of patrols." This conversation marked a turning point in their relationship. Sam began to rely on Miller's experience and insight, while Miller became more open to Sam's innovative approaches. Together, they formed a powerful bridge between the old guard and the new direction of the department. Sam's relationship with Officer Sarah Chen also deepened. The young officer's willingness to speak up about Councilman Hawthorne's meddling had impressed Sam, and she saw in Chen a potential future leader. She began mentoring Chen, encouraging her to take on more responsibility and to voice her ideas for community engagement. "You remind me a lot of myself when I was your age," Sam told Chen one day after a particularly successful community outreach event. "You have good instincts and a real commitment to serving the public. Don't ever lose that." Chen beamed at the praise. "Thank you, Chief. I'm learning so much from you. The way you stand up for what's right, even when it's difficult, it's inspiring." However, not all of Sam's relationships within the department were as positive. A small group of officers, still resistant to change, continued to push back against her reforms. Led by Officer Daniels, who had returned from his temporary transfer, more bitter than ever, they often found subtle ways to undermine her initiatives. Sam knew she couldn't ignore this faction, but she also recognized that not everyone would be won over. She focused on ensuring that these officers followed the new policies and procedures, even if they didn't fully embrace the philosophy behind them. Outside the department, Sam worked tirelessly to build and strengthen relationships with community leaders. She became a regular presence at neighborhood meetings, church gatherings, and local events. Slowly but surely, she began to see a change in how people reacted to the police presence in their communities. One of her most meaningful relationships developed with Mrs. Evelyn Thompson, a respected elder in the historically black neighborhood of Westside. Mrs. Thompson had initially been skeptical of Sam, viewing her as just another cop in a long line of broken promises. But Sam's persistence and genuine desire to listen began to win Mrs. Thompson over. After one community meeting where Sam had honestly addressed the neighborhood's concerns about over-policing, Mrs. Thompson approached her. "You know, Chief Carter," she said, her voice warm but still carrying a note of caution, "I've been in this neighborhood for over 60 years. I've seen police chiefs come and go, each one promising change. But you're different. You're actually listening to us." Sam felt a lump in her throat at the older woman's words. "Thank you, Mrs. Thompson. Your support means a lot to me. I promise I'm here to make real, lasting change." Thompson patted Sam's hand. "I believe you, child, and I'll be here to hold you to that promise." As Sam drove home that evening, she reflected on the web of relationships she had built and nurtured over the past months. Each connection, whether within the department or in the community, was a thread in the fabric of trust she was working to weave. It was challenging, often frustrating work, but as she thought about the progress they had made, Sam felt a sense of real hope for the future of policing in Millbrook. She knew there would be more challenges ahead, more relationships to navigate and rebuild. But for the first time since taking on this role, Sam felt that she was truly beginning to make a difference, not just as a police chief, but as a bridge builder between the police and the community they served. The tensions that had been simmering in Millbrook came to a boil on a sweltering summer afternoon. A peaceful protest against police brutality in a neighboring city had turned violent, and the effects were rippling outward. In Millbrook, a crowd had gathered in front of the police station, their chants growing louder and more insistent as the hours passed. Sam stood at the window of her office, watching the scene unfold with a mixture of concern and determination. She had been preparing for a moment like this, hoping it wouldn't come, but knowing it was a possibility. "Chief," Sergeant Miller said, entering her office with a grim expression, "the crowd is getting restless. Some of the officers want to gear up, show some force to keep things under control." Sam shook her head firmly. "No, that's exactly what we're not going to do. Get me a megaphone. I'm going out there." As Sam stepped out of the station, she could feel the tension in the air. The crowd's chants faltered for a moment as they saw her, a black woman in a police chief's uniform, standing before them without riot gear or defensive line of officers. "My name is Samantha Carter," she began, her voice carrying over the murmur of the crowd. "I'm the chief of police here in Millbrook. I see you, I hear you, and I'm here to listen." For a moment, there was silence. Then, a young man stepped forward, anger etched on his face. "Listen, we're tired of talking. We want action. How many more black lives have to be lost before something changes?" Sam met his gaze steadily. "You're right, talk isn't enough, but neither is violence. I'm not here to make empty promises. I'm here to invite you inside. Right now, let's sit down together and draft a concrete plan for change." A ripple of surprise went through the crowd. This wasn't the response they had expected. Sam continued, "I know many of you don't trust the police. You have good reasons not to, but I'm asking you to take a chance on something different. Help us rewrite the rules. Be part of the change." For a tense moment, it could have gone either way. Sam could see some people in the crowd itching for confrontation, while others looked intrigued by her offer. Then, Mrs. Thompson's voice rang out from the back of the crowd. I say we hear her out. Chief Carter's been working to make changes. Maybe it's time we work with her instead of against her. Slowly, cautiously, a group of protesters followed Sam into the station. As they filed past the stunned officers, Sam caught Sergeant Miller's eye and nodded. He understood, quickly organizing a team to maintain peace outside while the discussions took place. What followed was unlike anything Millbrook had ever seen. In the conference room, Sam sat down with community leaders, activists, and concerned citizens. Together, they began to draft a comprehensive plan for police reform, addressing everything from use of force policies to community oversight. The discussions were heated at times, with years of pent-up frustration and mistrust bubbling to the surface. But Sam remained calm, listening intently and facilitating a productive dialogue. As the night wore on, word spread about what was happening inside the station. The crowd outside gradually dispersed, replaced by news crews and curious onlookers. Social media buzzed with updates, and soon Millbrook's unprecedented community police collaboration was making national headlines. In the early hours of the morning, as the group finally emerged from the station, there was a palpable sense of accomplishment. They had a long way to go, but they had taken the first crucial steps together. As Sam stood on the steps of the station, flanked by community leaders and her officers, she knew that this night would be remembered as a turning point. In the face of potential violence, they had chosen dialogue. In a moment of crisis, they had found an opportunity for real change. The road ahead would not be easy, but as the first light of dawn broke over Millbrook, Sam felt a renewed sense of purpose. They had shown what was possible when police and community came together as partners. Now, the real work of transforming those possibilities into reality could begin. In the weeks following the climactic event at the police station, Sam found herself navigating a complex landscape of hope, skepticism, and entrenched resistance. The plan drafted during that long night of discussions had become known as the Millbrook Accord, and its implementation was now Sam's primary focus. The accord called for sweeping changes: a civilian oversight board with real power, mandatory de-escalation training for all officers, a complete overhaul of use of force policies, and a new community policing initiative that would see officers regularly engaging with residents in non-enforcement contexts. Sam knew that bringing these changes to fruition would be her greatest challenge yet. She decided to tackle the implementation in stages, starting with the formation of the Civilian Oversight Board. We need to show the community that we're serious about accountability, Sam explained to her command staff during a tense meeting. This board isn't a threat to us. It's an opportunity to build trust. Despite her assurances, many officers viewed the board as a direct challenge to their authority. The police union, in particular, pushed back hard against the idea. "This is going too far, Chief," Union Representative Jack O'Malley argued. "You're hanging us out to dry. Every split-second decision we make in the field is going to be second-guessed by civilians who've never worn the badge." Sam listened to these concerns, recognizing the fear behind the anger. "I understand your worries," she replied calmly. "But consider this. If we have nothing to hide, if we're doing our jobs correctly, then this board will vindicate us. It will show the community that when we say we're here to protect and serve, we mean it." To address the union's concerns, Sam proposed a compromise. The board would include retired law enforcement officers alongside civilian members, ensuring that the police perspective was represented. She also insisted on a rigorous training program for all board members, so they would understand the complexities of police work. This compromise helped to soften some of the resistance, but Sam knew she still had a long way to go. She decided to take a more personal approach, meeting with officers in small groups to discuss their concerns and explain the benefits of the new system. During one such meeting, Officer Chen spoke up. "Chief, I support what you're trying to do, but some of us are worried. What happens if we make an honest mistake? Are we going to lose our jobs because of this board?" Sam appreciated Chen's honesty. "That's a fair question, Sarah. The board isn't there to punish honest mistakes. It's there to identify patterns, to help us improve our practices, and yes, to hold us accountable when we genuinely mess up. but it's also there to protect us from false accusations. A transparent process benefits everyone. These conversations were challenging, often emotional, but slowly, Sam began to see a shift in attitudes. More officers started to engage with the idea, offering suggestions on how to make the oversight process fair and effective. Meanwhile, Sam worked tirelessly to get community buy-in for the accord. She knew that for true conflict resolution, both sides needed to feel heard and valued. She organized town halls, went door-to-door in neighborhoods, and leveraged social media to keep the public informed and involved. One particularly powerful moment came during a community meeting in the West Side neighborhood. A young man named Marcus, whose brother had been killed in a police shooting the previous year, stood up to speak. "I appreciate what you're trying to do, Chief Carter," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "But how can we trust that anything will really change? We've heard promises before." Sam met his gaze steadily. "You're right, Marcus. Words aren't enough. That's why we're not just making promises. We're changing policies, creating new structures for accountability. But more than that, we're asking for your help. Join the Oversight Board. Help us train our officers. Be part of this change." Marcus was quiet for a moment, then nodded slowly. "Okay, I'll give it a shot, for my brother." This exchange epitomized Sam's approach to conflict resolution, acknowledging past wrongs, offering concrete solutions, and inviting those who had been hurt to be part of the healing process. As the first phase of the Millbrook Accords implementation neared completion, Sam could see progress, but she also recognized the fragility of what they had achieved. Trust was building, but slowly. Some officers were embracing the changes, while others remained resistant. The true test came when the newly formed Oversight Board reviewed its first case, a complaint of excessive force against an officer during an arrest. The board's deliberations were thorough and fair, ultimately finding that the officer had followed proper procedures, but recommending additional de-escalation training for the entire force. This balanced decision helped to allay some fears within the department while also demonstrating to the community that the board had real teeth. It wasn't a perfect solution, but it was a start. As Sam reviewed the board's report, she felt a mix of pride and determination. They had taken the first steps toward resolving the deep-seated conflicts between the police and the community, but the journey was far from over. "This is working," Sergeant Miller commented, reading the report over her shoulder. "It's not easy, but it's working." Sam nodded, allowing herself a small smile. "It is. But we can't let up now. This is just the beginning." As she looked out her office window at the city she had sworn to protect and serve, Sam knew that true conflict resolution would be an ongoing process. It would require constant effort, open communication, and a willingness to confront uncomfortable truths. But for the first time in a long time, she felt hopeful that real, lasting change was possible in Millbrook. 6 months after the implementation of the Millbrook Accord began, a pivotal moment arrived that would set the course for the future of policing in the city. The Department of Justice, intrigued by the innovative approach Millbrook was taking, announced a pilot program to study and potentially replicate successful community policing initiatives across the country. Millbrook was selected as one of 5 cities to participate. This announcement brought with it both excitement and anxiety. It meant increased scrutiny and pressure, but also the potential for Millbrook to become a national model for police reform. Sam called a department-wide meeting to discuss this new development. As she stood before her officers, she could see the mix of emotions on their faces: pride, apprehension, determination. "This is our chance," she began, her voice carrying through the room, "to show not just Millbrook, but the entire country, what modern, community-focused policing can look like. We've come a long way, but we have further still to go. This program will push us to be better, to innovate, to truly reimagine what it means to protect and serve." She outlined the new initiatives that would be part of the pilot program: a co-responder model that would pair officers with mental health professionals for certain calls, a youth police academy designed to build positive relationships with young people, and an expanded community service officer program to handle non-emergency situations. "I know change isn't easy," Sam continued, acknowledging the concerns she could see on some faces. but look at what we've already accomplished. Crime rates are down, community trust is up. We're making a real difference." As the meeting concluded, Sam could feel a shift in the energy of the room. There was a newfound sense of purpose, a collective realization that they were part of something important. Officer Chen approached her after the meeting, eyes bright with excitement. "Chief, I'd like to volunteer to lead the Youth Academy program. I have some ideas I think could really make a difference." Sam smiled, feeling a surge of pride in the growth she'd seen in Chen and many others. "That's exactly the kind of initiative we need, Sarah. Let's set up a time to discuss your ideas." As she watched her officers file out, talking animatedly among themselves, Sam knew they had reached a turning point. The department was no longer just reacting to changes thrust upon them. They were actively shaping the future of policing. With renewed determination, Sam turned to the task of preparing Millbrook for its new role as a national leader in police reform. The path ahead would be challenging, but she was ready to lead her department and her city into this new era of community-centered law enforcement. As the one-year anniversary of her appointment as chief approached, Sam found herself in a reflective mood. Sitting in her office late one evening, she looked out over the city she had sworn to protect and serve, marveling at how much had changed, not just in Millbrook, but within herself. The woman who had been racially profiled on her first day as chief felt like a different person now. She had grown into her role, facing challenges head-on and learning valuable lessons along the way. Her leadership style had evolved, becoming more nuanced and adaptive as she navigated the complex dynamics of police reform. Sam thought back to the angry, skeptical faces she had encountered in her early days as chief. Many of those same officers now looked to her with respect and even admiration. She had learned to balance firmness with empathy, to push for change while also acknowledging the fears and concerns of her staff. Her relationship with the community had deepened as well. The trust she had worked so hard to build was bearing fruit, with more residents willing to cooperate with police and engage in community initiatives. She thought of Mrs. Thompson, who had gone from being one of her harshest critics to one of her strongest allies. But perhaps the most profound change had been in Sam's understanding of what it meant to be a leader in law enforcement. She had come to see her role not just as a manager of police officers, but as a bridge builder between the police and the community, a catalyst for social change and a guardian of civil rights. As she reflected on this growth, Sam realized that her journey had also impacted those around her. Officer Chen had blossomed into a promising young leader, spearheading community engagement programs with enthusiasm and creativity. Sergeant Miller, once the voice of old-school policing, had become one of the department's strongest advocates for reform. Even some of her former critics, like Officer Daniels, had shown signs of growth. While he might never fully embrace all of her changes, he had grudgingly admitted that some of the new policies were making their jobs easier and safer. Sam's thoughts were interrupted by a knock on her door. It was Councilman Hawthorne, once her most vocal political opponent. "Chief Carter," he said, his tone respectful, "I wanted to congratulate you on the success of the DOJ pilot program. The preliminary results are impressive." Sam nodded, surprised but pleased by the acknowledgement. "Thank you, Councilman. It's been a team effort." Hawthorne hesitated, then continued, "I'll admit I had my doubts about your approach, but I can't argue with the results. You've changed my mind about a lot of things." As he left, Sam felt a sense of vindication. She had not only grown herself, but had facilitated growth in others, even those who had initially resisted her most strongly. Looking back at the challenges she had faced, the racial profiling incident, the resistance to her reforms, the tense standoff with protesters, Sam realized that each obstacle had been an opportunity for growth. Each conflict had forced her to dig deeper, to find new reserves of strength and wisdom. She was not the same woman who had been pulled over on her first day as chief. She was stronger, wiser, more compassionate, and more determined than ever to create lasting change. As she finally prepared to head home, Sam felt a renewed sense of purpose. The journey had been difficult, but it had shaped her into the leader Millbrook needed. And while there were still challenges ahead, she knew she was ready to face them, not just as a police chief, but as a true guardian of justice and community. On the morning of her one-year anniversary as chief, Sam stood before a gathered crowd of officers, city officials, and community members. The atmosphere was charged with a sense of accomplishment and hope. A year ago, Sam began, her voice strong and clear, I stood before you as an outsider, someone who had just experienced firsthand the very issues I was brought here to address. Today, I stand before you not as an outsider, but as a member of this community, as your chief, and as someone who has seen the incredible potential for change when we work together. She paused, looking out at the faces before her. Officer Chen, beaming with pride. Sergeant Miller, nodding in agreement. Mrs. Thompson, her eyes glistening with unshed tears. We've proven that change is possible, Sam continued. We've shown that police and community can work together, that accountability and effective law enforcement are not mutually exclusive. But our work is far from over. This is just the beginning. As she concluded her speech, Sam reflected on the themes that had defined her journey. The power of perseverance in the face of adversity, the importance of building bridges between divided groups, and the transformative potential of leadership that listens and adapts. Let us move forward, she said, her voice filled with determination. Not as separate entities, police and community, but as one Millbrook, united in our commitment to justice, safety, and mutual respect. The applause that followed was thunderous, a testament to how far they had come and a promise of the progress yet to be made. As Sam looked out at the crowd, she knew that the story of Millbrook's transformation was far from over. But with each challenge they overcame, with each mind they changed, they were writing a new chapter in the history of policing. One of hope, unity, and positive change.